Thank you for taking this time this morning to be here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, I really appreciate this because this is something that I do. So all of you out there that are watching this, make sure that you pay attention right now. What I tend to do is, if you compliment this podcast anyway, and you tell me you've been looking at it, likely I'm going to ask you if you'll come on. Especially if you look like you'll be willing to do it. Anyway, thank you so much for doing this. And you did say that you liked watching the podcast.
I do.
And then I looked at your credentials and I said, my goodness, a lecturer at Keio, and you're fantastic.
Thank you.
Where were you born?
I was born in Chicago.
Okay. Where in Chicago?
Southside.
Southside.
Actually, what was the name? Oak Lawn, I think is the name of the neighborhood.
Okay. And you grew up there?
Yeah, I grew up in a neighborhood called Riverdale, which is, if you're familiar at all with Chicago,
Right.
just south of a neighborhood called Pullman, which is a fairly famous district of the city. So yeah, I grew up there. It was a very peaceful memory of childhood for like growing up in that neighborhood, but
Okay.
looking at it now as an adult and seeing what was actually going on was kind of a surprise.
Ooh.
Like,
Do you have siblings?
I do. I have an older sister, 3 years older than me, and a younger brother who's 2 years younger.
Mom and dad still alive? Are they
My
doing
father
okay?
passed away maybe 5 years ago or
I'm
so.
sorry
My
to hear
mom's
that.
still alive. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, my mother is still in
Did
the
they stay
Chicago
together
area.
the whole time?
Yes.
They
They
did?
stayed together.
Now, may I ask, are you religious? Do you have a religious background?
No, we were not raised in a religion, although we were, kind of a strange story. We were sent to a church for a short period of time. A bus would come and pick us up and take us away to a church. They called themselves a church. It was some sort of a non-denominational facility that my only really strong memories of were the pastor and his wife speaking in tongues at the front of the church.
Would they baptize you? Would they baptize you with olive oil?
I don't remember doing that, but
Did they play music?
I don't remember music either. I remember singing songs and sitting with my siblings in the back of the church, making up new lyrics to
So how old were
to
you
the
when this
song.
happened?
Oh, I would have been maybe 7, 8 years old.
Okay, so you
around there.
remember this, yeah.
So yeah, it was just my brother and sister and I. And I think my parents were sending us off because they couldn't afford a babysitter. So this was their adult alone time.
How long did you do this?
I would say maybe 2 years or so. And yeah, my
And the guy would
sister,
speak in tongues.
they would speak in tongues, and then they would invite people to come up and, like, if you pray hard enough, you will speak in tongues
But
as well.
did
So
anybody have any, fits and stuff? Did people do that?
not that I recall, no.
Because I
But
went to a church like that once.
okay,
It was my best friend's father was a preacher, and he also worked with my father. They worked as postal clerks. And I guess his weekend job was being a preacher. And they took olive oil and they put it on people, and people would start flipping around like fish and stuff and speaking tongues. So then he said, Lance, come on up here. I said, no, I don't want to go. And he called me a couple more times, like as if I was going to jump in. I said, no, I don't want to go. And then I said, Dad, I don't want to go back there anymore. And I said, why didn't you ever have me baptized as a Catholic? And he said, because I think it should be your decision. And he never
Wise
did. So I
man.
said, I'm not doing it then.
I don't remember much of the church experience except for volunteering to go up and speak in tongues. And
And did you do it?
I did.
You went up
Of
there
course, it
and
was
spoke in tongues.
totally performative. It was.
But who's that? Well, you think the others weren't? You think theirs wasn't? Wait. Yours was, you went up there 7 years old.
Yeah.
And what'd they do? Did they grab you by the shoulders or something?
No,
or
there would be, random people who would get up from the seating area and come up to the front and just
So what about
let
your brother
God
and
speak
sister?
through you.
What about your
Oh,
sister
it
and your
was,
brother?
I'm
Did
sure,
they do it?
I'm sure, no, I don't think so, but I'm sure it was a dare on their part. And,
Okay.
I rarely turn down dares.
So you were that one. You were that one. Listen, let's go get Laurie today. Let's see what happens to her when she jumps off this building. So growing up, tell me, were you more physical or were you more academic growing up as a child?
I was actually quite balanced between the two. I was on all the sports teams and also all of the nerd teams. I grew up playing softball. I was on the track and field team volleyball for years. So yeah, playing in all the sports. But then I was also a member of the biology club and the mathletes, where we would go to other high schools and have math competitions.
Oh, okay. So tell me, what kind of work did your father and mother do?
My mother was just a it's a pejorative. I shouldn't use
Right,
that.
right,
My
right.
mother was a homemaker.
Which is a lot of work. There's no doubt about
Quite
that.
a lot of
I
work.
can appreciate that.
And my father was in banking, but not in the way that most people imagine a banker. This is it's a smaller level financial institution.
Okay.
That
But he's still one of the, we call them savings and loans, something like
yes,
that?
yes, I
Okay.
think something like that.
Yeah. But was it in the neighborhood, close to the neighborhood?
It was,
Sure.
yeah, and, it's a short drive away, I think.
Okay.
But I think he moved several different locations during his career. But he was one of the people, I would guess this would be the early 90s, late 80s. I don't remember the timeline well, but who was forced out in early retirement due to, economic downturn at the time and didn't work after that. So,
What age was that, do you think?
oh, he would have been in his 50s.
Oh, his 50s,
Yeah,
okay.
so still.
So he didn't do anything after that?
He did just sort of trading, stock
Okay.
trading online at home.
Oh, so he did stuff at home.
Yeah.
Your kids are still young.
Yes, well, young, first year of high school and first year of university.
Now, I saw some old pictures then, because those old pictures. I was thinking you had a little 7-year-old. I thought you had a 7 and 8-year-old. How old are they? The ones
19 and 16.
And it's boy and a girl.
Yes.
Who's the oldest?
My son, Kai.
Your son, okay.
Yeah.
The love of your heart. You're going to love this saying. I heard that for a son, his first true love is his mother, and for a mother, her last true love is her son. Isn't that something?
Yeah, I'm sure there's quite a lot of truth in that.
Yeah.
Raising a son has been an adventure, and as a 19-year-old, all the years coming up to 19, I've been waiting for that moment where he creates that sort of necessary separation between his mother and himself, and it has not come yet. He would be more than happy to hold hands with me and walk down the street.
Are you
and
kidding?
I don't think he would be
Blink an
embarrassed
eye.
at all.
And
My
you take
daughter
advantage of
would-
that
my
too.
daughter
You
would
take
run in.
advantage of that too.
Of course.
Your daughter's what? She's had that separation.
Oh, yes. I mean, I think that's sort of typical for
Yeah.
raising a daughter as the mother. I think she wanted that separation pretty much from birth. She was strong and independent and still is. She's amazing, but not not needing the mother type.
Now, how old is she?
She's 16 now.
16,
Yeah.
16. How old was your son when he started walking?
Oh, gosh. He
remember?
started walking pretty early. I know that oftentimes male children walk later, but he was,
9 months, 10 months?
yeah, probably somewhere around there. I know even at 6 months he was using, those walkers that you put them in and just
He was just going
speeding
for it.
all over the place. And yeah.
Your daughter, how old was she?
She, I think, was actually a little bit later
Oh,
when
did
she
she?
started walking. Yeah.
Watching him bumping the walls and stuff. She figured
She,
it out. I'll stand here for a second.
she was not she didn't have that need for speed, I think, that my son had. She was more of the jumper type, just standing in place,
And run up
bouncing
and down.
about.
Just building muscles and make sure I get this right first. That's interesting. Okay, so going through school, you were pretty balanced as far as sports and as far as academics went. Did you have any favorites as far as sports or academics? Did you have any particular subjects you liked the most? Because you went off to a fair. You said you went off to the science fair, biology fair?
Yes, I did participate in the science fairs, and I love doing those science projects, the ones that you have in junior high and high school. I don't know if they even still do those anymore. Where, you go through you have your projects that you display, and the parents get to come and see the science fair on your school's campus, and then the select few go to the district level and the state level. So I did get to participate in the state science fair once.
What was it? What was the project?
It was on solar energy,
Okay.
and this would have been like around 80, 84 or so. So before solar energy was actually
A big thing.
a big thing. And I thought it was a brilliant project, but looking at it now, I think I don't even remember what I did, but it involved basically like using a light bulb to heat a variety of different materials and see which one is retaining more heat. What that had to do with solar energy, I'm not exactly sure. But
this was by yourself?
Yeah.
You didn't do it as a team?
No, these are all solo projects. So yeah, I had really good memories of doing that. And I remember my parents coming to see the state science fair. And my father making some comment afterwards that he continued to use towards me in many instances later in life, something about you can pull the wool over anybody's eyes, meaning that I won this prize, but there was really not a lot of basis or science behind that science.
Okay.
And I think he saw that and thought it was kind of funny. So.
But you still won.
I still won.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. So, okay, so through high school, what was your focus in high school? Because you have to start to get serious now as you start from a junior to a senior.
I had a strange high school experience. I went to a really large high school on the south side of Chicago. I would guess roughly 4,000 students or so, just a very, very large school in an economically disadvantaged area. I grew up kind of on the cusp of upper lower class or lower middle class, somewhere around there. And
so the school was really mixed.
Yes, it was.
What was the percentage, like a black to white?
Oh, I would say roughly 90% black, probably 5%.
Did you have blonde
white.
hair then too when you were younger?
Yes.
And you was okie dokie. So tell me your experience.
As I mentioned earlier, I was actually quite good at sport, and I was playing volleyball for the school team, and I think this was in my second year of high school. We were playing volleyball in gym class, and of course I was better than just the regular girls who are playing, and I wasn't smart enough to know how to not play my fullest, so I spiked a ball and it hit a girl's hand. She was probably trying to block it and broke her finger. And after that, troubles started to happen. I was often singled out and beaten up in the hall and just had all sorts of not great experiences.
No one came to your aid?
If it was in the hall in front of people, like where the teachers were around, then that was usually stopped. But there were several incidents in the locker room that, where there's not those eyes there. And so, yeah, it wasn't the best place for an education. And I was really, I was a book reader. I loved books as a child and really enjoyed studies. So I knew from second year of high school that I needed to get out of that school and find somewhere that I could get a better education. But as I think most areas in the U.S. are, the private schools are religious institutions. And I didn't grow up. Yeah, it was all in my neighborhood. It was almost all Catholic schools. Mm-hmm. And I didn't grow up with religion, so that was one of the reasons I couldn't transfer to those schools, but also financially, my parents couldn't afford that. So I decided at that ripe old age of 15 that I was going to go overseas and study abroad. So I don't know.
That would have made you still a sophomore, no, junior?
I was sophomore.
A sophomore, right?
Yeah, when I decided this was what I was going to do. So I ended up writing to the Australian embassy. And of course, this was way before internet and all of that. So I write a letter to the Australian embassy, and they sent me a nice list of schools to contact. And one of them said, yeah, we'll take you, come on out. And they found me a host family. So I was 16, I guess, when I left. I did most of my junior, senior year then.
Who funded it?
Well, I went, before I left, I didn't have money for airfare or anything. So I went around to like the Kiwanis Club, I guess, and the Lions Club and all of those and gave them a little speech about, what I wanted to do. And they each gave me a few $100s here and there. And I made enough money for the airfare.
You did this all on your own?
Yeah.
What's Dad saying about this? And what's Mom saying about this at the time? And your brother and sister?
I'm sure at the beginning they probably thought this was just another fantasy of mine and that it wasn't really going to happen. But when I started actually going out and collecting money, I think they realized, wow, she's actually going to try and do this. And I'm sure they were very supportive. So yeah, I ended up at a really lovely school in Australia called Presbyterian Ladies College.
What you know, Laurie? Wait just a minute. Wait. Now you're all of 15. I'm just trying to picture this. Okay, so you're all of 15. You've collected the money. First of all, you've got Matsi or whatever to be able to go to these organizations alone to speak to them to get them to give you funds.
Mm-hmm.
So they did that.
Mm-hmm.
You had no issues, but you'd already been beaten up by some black kids. So you said, "Hey, what could be worse than that?" You said, I've earned my stripes. This is easy. Shoot, no. So you went to these different organizations. You got the funds. Had you ever flown and been anywhere before?
I had never been anywhere. As I said, I mean, we were financially not very well off, and the only time we took a vacation in my entire childhood was we drove from Chicago down to St. Louis and stopped at random places along the way, like some Indian burial mound, and so that was my entire experience of traveling outside of Chicago.
I bet that was fun when you did it.
It was great, yes.
But you're looking back. See, you're telling it to me after you've seen it, you realize what happened. Because we used to go camping all the time.
Okay.
And I told my mother, that would just be so much fun. She said, no, we only did that because we couldn't afford to go to hotels. I said, it's fun to me.
Right.
A good time. So you got on the plane to go. And tell me how did it go on?
Well, I just remember being on the plane very first time on a plane, so 16 years old, and realizing what I'm doing. It's like, I can't believe this is actually happening. I'm actually leaving. And, this is before cell phones, before internet, so I knew that I would be completely cut off out of contact with everyone that I know, and not knowing what it is I'm actually getting involved in on the other end. And just breaking down in tears in the airplane. And the reason was I put on the earphone to hear the movie, and mine weren't working. And that was like the last straw. Just the tears started.
Because you said, what am I really doing? Did you ever see yourself coming back home? Or?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I knew it was just short term. I was going to be there for the rest of high school, and that was it.
When that short term, you were a sophomore, right?
Yeah.
So that'd be 2 more years. You'd have.
I left in my junior year. So it was during my sophomore year that I was going through, all the contacts and getting everything set up.
So it took you a year, okay.
Yeah.
So how long did you stay, for a year? Or?
I stayed, junior and part of senior year.
So how was the experience? What was it like? You get to Australia?
It was one of the best times of my life. It changed who I am completely. And one of the things I always tell my own students now is, if you ever have a chance to study abroad, never pass that up. It's going to open up not only new worlds to you, but it's going to open up parts of yourself that you didn't know that you had. So for my experience, good and bad, the first family that the school had found for me was actually a daughter. They had their daughter in that school. So they were looking for someone who would be a friend.
What age? Same age?
Yeah, she was the same age as me. And she didn't have any friends at the school. So they kind of were hoping that, we'll take that sad-looking American girl and we'll have an instant friend for our daughter. And, we got along fine. There was no problem there. But I'm new to this country. I want to go out and make my own friends. And the family sort of pushed back against that. They didn't want me going out or doing
they
things
had you tethered
without
to her.
Yeah. So I was with them for several months, and then they were going on a family trip. We were up in Sydney, and we were going down to Melbourne. And I remember getting out of the train station in Melbourne, and the mother standing there. I still have this really vivid picture of it. They had 3 kids in the family. I remember the 3 kids and the mother, and I guess the father wasn't there with us. She turns and looks at me and she says, Laurie, I don't think you're going to enjoy anything that we're going to do. So why don't you go do what you want to do? And they walked away and they left me at the central station in Melbourne. I was 16 years old with, no phone, no money. I didn't even know who I would call if I could call someone. And that's the last time I saw that family.
What did the daughter do that you'd been tethered to? What did she do? She look at you and go, yeah, something like that?
No, they all just, I'm amazed that that this woman actually did this to me. But I'm also amazed that no one sort of seemed to bat an eye. It seemed like maybe it was orchestrated in advance because they all just sort of turned and walked away and left me there. Yeah. So that was my first family.
So how did you get out of that? To resolve this for us, please.
Yeah, I was obviously another one of those moments where you break down in tears.
Okay.
It's usually the beginning of most solutions. Start with tears, and then I remember just standing there crying, and a very nice person on the street asked me if I was okay. Obviously, I wasn't, and they brought me to a police station. And the police station, got my details, and is there anyone we could contact for you? And I'm just searching my mind. Who do I know? Who do I know? And I had a boyfriend up in Sydney, so I'm gonna call his mom maybe, and they called her. I didn't know her number or anything, so but they somehow, in the old day, they probably popped out that telephone book and.
You knew her name and everything.
Yeah, I knew her name. So they contacted her, and she actually came all the way down to Melbourne to get me. So I stayed in a hotel that night, and then that next morning she was down and brought me back up. I stayed with them for a couple nights while they tried to find a family for me, and one of my friends from school offered her family obviously offered to have me stay. Really, really beautiful family, kind of one of those Leave It to Beaver type of families. I was not with them very long because after a few weeks there, their father found out he had cancer. So it was bad timing to be with. But in that short time that I was there, my biggest memory was every day the mother baked a pie, a homemade pie, every single day. And I remember like the kids coming home and the first thing they would, the smell as you open the door, Mom, what's today's pie? And yeah, can you imagine?
How old were the kids?
Their daughter obviously was my age, and I think they had an older son.
Wasn't this your boyfriend? No, this is a different family.
Different family. So she was Jewish. She was in my school. She was a classmate, and then an older brother, and I think a younger brother as well. So yeah, it was
every day a pie.
Every day a pie. Can you imagine doing that? Baking a pie every single day.
And then the dad had cancer.
Yeah.
Are you still in contact with any of the people that you met?
Not with those two families, but then my third family. So after having to leave that family, I was able, through actually my boyfriend's mom, then found me a family completely not related to my school. I have no idea what that connection was, how she found them, but they were amazing. I stayed with them the rest of my time, the Morrises, and I'm sure some of them are going to be watching this.
How much time was that?
Oh, I was there, I'd say 8 months or so.
8 months.
Yeah. And I still am in contact with every single member of that family. I've followed, especially now with things like Facebook and Instagram.
And they're all doing well?
They are all doing wonderfully well.
So how big was their family?
3 children.
Ages were they? When you were growing up, were they your age? You had 2 girls?
Yeah. So John, I think, was a year or 2 older than me. Then Chris, a year younger, and Rowena.
Was Chrissy a girl or boy?
Boy.
Okay, 2 boys and a girl.
2 boys, and then Rowena, the girl, was a couple years younger.
And they're all married now with kids of their own?
They are all married now with kids of their own, and yes, and beautiful children. Really, really a joy to have watched.
They call you auntie? They call you?
No. I've never actually met their children in person. I have not been back to Australia since, I think, 91.
You're gonna have to get back there and see them.
I'm definitely going to.
But have you done video chat with them yet?
No.
Oh, come on. Well, this is close. You're gonna get there when they see you on this. You're gonna have to get on the video and see them. So tell me what happened with them when you were with them.
Well, I think they were just a really, really wonderful family. They were into orienteering. Which I was a Chicago girl. My orienteering is where you're out in like absolute nature with a compass and a map.
That's called orienteering.
Orienteering. And I don't know exactly what they're looking for, but they're looking for something with these 2 things. And they're running around in the woods. And so I was taken to a lot of orienteering events. I guess there were events. Did not actually participate. I was just camping alongside of them.
Was this their whole family would do this? Or
the whole family, yeah.
Okay.
And being Australia, and you're out in the outback. I don't know if they actually call it the outback, but you're out, out of the city. Lots and lots of nature involved, like spiders.
Okay, so what happened? So
I remember one evening, I was in the tent, asleep probably, and the father comes and taps me on the shoulder. He's like, Laurie, come out here by the fire. And I'm sleeping. I'm like, no, just come out by the fire for a few minutes. And so I go out, and he goes back in the tent, and he comes out, okay, you can go back to sleep. And there were a couple of funnel web spiders in
They were
the
in
tent.
there that he's trying to get you to get up so they could.
So he
But
could
aren't
get
these
them out.
poisonous?
Yes, yes. So I'm very grateful that he did that, or noticed that they were in there.
Because if you got panicked, would they? Are they? Do they? I don't know. They jump or do they? Are they quick or?
I have no idea.
But he took care of them.
He took care of it for me. Yes. Yeah.
Wow. So what other ways were you changed? Okay, for one thing, you I'm sure you got a little more calm around creatures that you'd never seen before, so you don't have that problem anymore. What other things changed? Because you're a woman now. You're becoming into womanhood, so I'm sure.
I was, and I would still say I'm fairly shy. I guess I'm not anymore, but at that time I was very introverted, and I think I passed up on a lot of experiences, even when I was in Australia, because I was just afraid of joining into things. And then as time was going on, I'd start realizing, I really should have done this. I wish I would have tried that. So I think I learned quite a lot about myself at that time, and the fact that I was missing out on opportunities. I was like not letting myself experience things that I actually really wanted to try. So I learned that during that period. And also just, I think you're an American as well. You probably, when you first went overseas, that realization that America really is not the center of the world.
Isn't that interesting?
Yes. That you grow up thinking that everyone from the outside looks at us and thinks that
ours is in color, theirs is in black and white. Our world's in color. You guys live in a black and white world. That's what you believe.
Yes, yes.
So I call it reverse culture shock now. So you came back to the States. What did you feel when you came back to the States?
Oh.
Because you saw Australia completely different then.
Yeah.
And the U.S., of course.
I think at the time, I came back and I knew that I wanted to go back to Australia.
So you cried a lot when you got in the airport with the family?
I think going back, there was a lot of tears leaving. Yeah. And when I got back to Chicago, I had a few months until the official graduation date for American high schools. And it was that time period when I needed to decide college, what am I doing with my life? So once again, my old go-to there is I wrote to the Australian embassy and filed immigration papers. I tried to immigrate to Australia, so I would have been 17, 18.
But can you do that?
Well, they told me no.
You weren't old enough to be able to do it, right?
They actually, they sent me a very nice letter.
Your parents didn't know you were doing that?
I think they did.
Okay, yeah. Okay. This is okay. We got two here.
I received a very nice response from the embassy, basically telling me that they only accept people who can contribute to society in a meaningful way, which, okay, understood. I was 17, 18 years old. Probably didn't have a lot of skills to contribute, but that set me on the course that I went on. When I was in Australia, actually, one of my closest friends there was a Japanese girl, Kyoko, who I'm still in contact with. And from her, I of course, just talking about Japan, and it sounded also interesting. And she taught me a few words in Japanese. And, it just seemed like this would be something kind of fun to study.
You met her where?
When I was in Australia.
In Australia?
Yeah.
So how long did you know her while you were there? Was it towards the end?
Gosh, probably about a year or so.
Oh, yeah, so you know her for a year.
Yeah.
Same age?
Same age, yeah.
And she was at the same school?
No, she was at a different school.
A different school.
Yeah.
How'd you meet her?
She was an exchange student as well. So with the
group, the organization?
The group, yes.
So you had to meet every now and then just to check in.
Exactly.
And see how you were doing.
Yes, I did probably monthly meetings.
A monthly,
okay,
right.
Yeah.
So she was there.
Yes.
From Japan.
From Japan. And you know how Japanese people tend to stick with Japanese people. So all the Japanese students were, and I think all the American students were probably, we were all in our own country groups.
Right.
But she kind of, had that olive branch out in her hand, and she's that type of person, just, really open and
She was
welcoming.
like you. She wanted to go outside of her circle.
Exactly.
She said, it looks a little bit more interesting out there. I know this. Let me see what that's like.
Yeah.
So she came over to you. She said, wasn't blonde hair. We don't have those in Japan. So she came over to you. So she put out the olive branch.
Yeah.
You met with her. And then, was her English good enough? Or?
Yeah, I don't recall having any problems. I'm sure it wasn't perfect, but yeah, we had no problem communicating.
Okay.
And yeah, she's turned out to have a wonderful career. She was with Sony for quite a long time, kind of a very top level position there, and has lived abroad and now has a new dream. I don't know why I'm telling you all about my friend, but no, she impresses me so much because
she's here in Japan now?
She's here in Japan right now. No, she's actually in the U.S. right now.
Married, kids?
Married with a son. She, attained quite a high position in her career, and then decided that she wants to become a sushi chef. So while she was still working, she was started going to a cooking school, and now she's interning at a restaurant in Florida. And her long-term goal is to open a sushi restaurant in Spain. So she inspires me.
Okay, so tell me more about you. So you go back to the States.
Yeah, so when the Australian government declined my offer to move there for them, decided I probably should go to university. So yeah, I went to my undergraduate at Southern Illinois University, way down at the tip of Illinois, very rural location as well, where I finally learned how to camp. And it was a great time. Really, really wonderful community. I was, at the time, I was in sort of the punk rock community.
Is that right? Okay.
Yes. So I was very much into the, it's a hardcore punk rock scene.
Did you do tats and stuff too?
Not me.
Okay. Not me. But,
not me, but
you had a lot of friends that did.
A lot of friends who did.
Okay.
And I lived in a house where we had live shows in the basement. So pretty much every weekend we'd have shows with like bands from all around the U.S. who were on tour. They would come and play shows in the basement and then sleep on our floor for a night, and we'd feed them. And
no, you said we. What do you mean? Who's we?
I lived in a house, the punk rock house. So it was, several people.
Okay.
I think there were probably 4 or 5 of us in the house, but people would come and go, and it was one of those types of places where anyone in the community could kind of hang out. So I'd come home from classes, and there'd be 15, 20 people hang out in the living room, and it was really a great time. Just that sense of community is something I never had before, and I will never experience that again. Yeah, it was.
Okay, so from there, where did it lead you?
Well, when I started at university, as I said, with my friend Kyoko, I decided, well, I might want to study Japanese. So I was studying Japanese language, but my major was political science.
This is in Illinois?
This is, Southern Illinois. So this is my undergraduate. And I'm still very interested in politics. I just didn't like a lot of the courses that I had to take. I found them more old-fashioned in a sense than I had thought or anticipated the education would be. So I decided I was much more interested in the Japanese side of things. And they didn't have an Asian studies major at Southern Illinois. So I went through a program where you create your own major, basically. I had to design a major for myself. I just never do things the easy way. So I decided I'm going to design my own major, and put together at least a selection of courses that I wanted to take, and gave it a title, and had to present
Were you able to decide how many credits you get as a result of it too?
No, each of the courses actually has set credits, so I didn't get to choose that myself.
That'd be a winner. After this class, I'm done. All right.
Yeah, and then made the proposal to the dean, and they accepted it. So in the end, I ended up creating kind of an Asian studies, Japanese language type of.
Based off of what you did.
Yeah. So
but you were the only person doing it at first.
Only person doing it there. Yeah.
So what did it include?
Well, it was Japanese language, and I was also taking Korean, but they didn't have a Korean teacher, so I was doing that independent study type of.
Well, by that time, the internet was starting to come to fruition, right?
Yeah.
So you were able to get some materials.
Not quite yet.
Not
My
quite yet?
first brush with the internet was in graduate school.
Okay.
So it would have been 91, I guess. So yeah, after finishing my undergraduate degree, I decided to go on for my master's, and I went to University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. So moving up the state, getting a little closer back to Chicago. And there I was in the East Asian Studies program, and my degree was in Japanese literature. So yeah, my first master's degree was focusing on Japanese literature, and realized quickly that I'm not a literature person. And to this day, I don't dislike, but I don't really care for fiction. I'm much more of a nonfiction type. So I realized being a person who doesn't really like fiction as a literary specialist probably isn't the perfect fit for me, and decided to move on to University of California at Berkeley, where I was in the Ph.D. program there and in anthropology.
But this is your first time going to the West Coast now, right?
First time, well, I'd been to the West Coast on my way back from Australia.
Okay.
My plane had a bit of an accident, and I ended up stuck in LA. And my older sister was down in San Diego at the time, so she came up, and I ended up staying.
Was she in school there, or was she just?
No, she was married at the time, and her
got
husband
married.
was in the Navy.
Okay.
So they were down at the naval base in San Diego. So yeah, I ended up staying with her for probably a week or so, and that was 17, I guess, 18. Yeah.
Okay.
But actually living out there.
Your sister's older, your brother's younger.
Yes.
Okay. Wow. So you went there and you crashed with her for a while because of the plane incident.
Yeah, there was something. There was a delay. At this time, those direct flights, maybe they had them. I couldn't afford it. I don't remember. But I went from Australia, from Sydney to New Zealand, and we were supposed to land in Auckland. But we ended up in Christchurch. And we're all, they're telling us we have to get off the plane. We're in Christchurch, and we're all looking around like, why are we in Christchurch? We were supposed to go Auckland and then on to LA and then Chicago. And as we're getting off the plane in Christchurch, we're in this like holding area in the airport, and just waiting and waiting and waiting for what seemed like forever until an announcement came that our flight crew had gone on strike. Like in the middle of the flight.
Wait, couldn't they have waited a little bit? Come on.
So they put us all up in hotels in Christchurch. So I was delayed. So I had all of those connecting flights lined up, which now were no longer connecting. Right. So I got to LA and had no idea what I was supposed to do, how to rebook flights. I was still a kid. I had no clue what was going on. And I remember getting off the plane in LA, and this woman starts shouting my name. And she's like, Laurie, I'm like, who are you? Why are you yelling at me? It turned out she was the aunt of my father, who I probably had met as a child, but
she remembered you.
Yeah, I guess my father had called her because she was the only family that we had in LA to be there when I get off the plane, because I wouldn't know what was happening. So apparently the airlines must have called my parents to let them know. But I didn't know my parents knew, and I didn't know who this was. Anyway, so she took me for the night. My sister drove up the next day, and I went down and stayed with her as we figured out how to rebook all the flights. And today that stuff happened, like you can handle all of that so easily. I think they probably do it all for you now.
Well, then you miss all the adventure. You don't have a story anymore. All the stories are gone. You have to purposely create these stories now. That was your life.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And then that same series of flights flying then from LA, we had to stop in, this time I was going LA to, I think it was Denver to Chicago. And in Denver, the plane ran over the tow bar as we were landing. So we kind of skidded off the runway.
And that was fun.
I remember that.
That was
fun.
That
was a bit of excitement. And
in
then
America,
all of
they
the
tend
fire
to vocalize.
trucks coming.
They vocalize their feelings in the States. Very unlike Japanese, who would be very quiet. Just In the States, it was like going to the church you had to go to. You start speaking in tongues, right? So you get back home, you go back to Chicago after that. What'd you do from there? After staying with your sister?
Yeah, and I went back to Chicago and back to my parents' home. So after, quite a time away from that environment, I was back, but only for a few months, and then off to university after that.
To study what?
That was when I was starting my undergrad degree in that became a degree in not Japanese literature, in East Asian studies.
Okay.
So before I went to university, because I had several months, because I finished high school in Australia, but American system was still going. So I started a job at an advertising agency in Chicago. I'd have been 18, I guess, working as a receptionist.
Okay.
And it got me really interested in advertisement, which I still use in a lot of my work today. But it also gave me an understanding that I was not cut out for the business environment, that it's not where I felt like myself. And it could partially be because of the position, the lowest on the rung, and just,
You get all of the everything.
Yeah. All of the abuse of the customers at the front desk, as well as all of the pressure of, every single employee behind you, that this is, but there were perks as an advertising agency. One of our clients was a major chicken chain. So I had all of these free chicken coupons, and I was a vegetarian, still am. But you could give chicken coupons to all of your friends for free chicken, and so that was cultural capital at that time.
Right.
So yeah, I did that, and then off to university. So I used that time period to make money to go to university, because I didn't have any savings at the time. So yeah, I worked for a while and then saved up, off to university, and didn't realize the university system in America, the sort of financial aid system, if you have money, you don't actually qualify for a lot of the financial aid. So in that very first year, every cent that I had saved up working, that I was hoping to be able to use for 4 years of college, I had to use all in that first year. And then I could get the financial aid as soon as I'd used up all of my money. So yeah, I learned a bit about financial planning at that time as well.
So how'd you eventually come to Japan?
They said, we'll buy you a plane ticket. Do you want to go to Japan, or do you want to go back to Australia? So after university, I went back to Australia.
Your parents said this?
Yes.
Why?
That was my graduation gift.
Oh, yeah, okay, I
yes.
got you, okay.
So as a graduation gift, they knew I wanted to go somewhere. They couldn't afford to send me to 2 places, and I chose Australia, and I'm glad I did. I'd been away for 4 years at that time, and I did want to immigrate there, so I still wanted to go back and see everyone. So it wasn't until after graduate school that I finally got to Japan for the first time, and that was through a program with Princeton University. So it was a summer language program out in Kanazawa, and that was my very first experience living here. So living in Kanazawa, which is an absolutely beautiful city, and then back to the U.S., and then I was at Berkeley after that. So I didn't actually come to live in Japan until 1994. So I've been here since 94.
94.
Yeah.
And you haven't been back?
Back to travel, but not to live.
Not to live.
So I've lived here for almost 29 years. 29 years next month, in May. Yeah.
Permanent resident now?
Yes, permanent resident.
Okay.
Yeah.
2 children?
2 children.
Your husband's Japanese?
Yes, my ex is Japanese.
Okay.
Yes.
Is he also an academic?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
He is the director of a program that used to be called the Stanford Center. So it's through Stanford University, but now it's run by a consortium of American universities. So the title is the America Kanada Daigaku Rengo Nihon Kenkyu Center.
Okay.
So yeah, a bit of a mouthful.
It is. So you actually learned to read and write as well?
Yes.
Okay. How long did that take?
Well, I started studying Japanese my freshman year of university. So through freshman year and then through graduate school, I guess I studied 6 years. And then when I was at UC Berkeley, I was actually teaching Japanese. Okay. So I was first year Japanese, so the very basics. But I found that when I actually got to Japan to live, that I could read and write, but I couldn't really speak. So it was sort of the opposite for how a lot of foreigners in Japan, they can come here and they'll pick up spoken Japanese, but they never learn how to read or write. Whereas I had all the book learning, I got here and I could communicate like really formally, but people would look at me really strange. Right, like, what is wrong with her? So yeah, I was in the program through that center, it's a program that's designed to teach advanced level Japanese for research purposes for academics. So it's universities Harvard, Yale, Princeton, University of Chicago, UCLA, UC Berkeley. So it's graduate students in a variety of different disciplines who are all focusing on some aspect of Japan. So I did that program for a year, intending fully to return to the US and hopefully find a teaching position back there. But while I was here, I was offered a position at Keio. And I thought, great university. I will definitely do that for a year or so. And this is year 28.
Now, you say you're a lecturer there, but you're not a lecturer. What does that mean, being a lecturer there?
Oh, well, it means that I lecture. I teach courses, but I am not what would be considered like a full professor.
Okay. So, I got it now. Because I was wondering, because I know what a lecturer is, but I just didn't understand what other responsibilities you'd have to have outside of lecturing. I figured you'd have to be teaching classes or something. So they keep you on just a yearly basis.
Yes, the contracts here are yearly renewable, but as long as you don't commit crimes.
Don't mess up, right, of course. Before I end the podcast, Laurie, I always like to ask this question, which you might be ready for since you saw some of the podcast. If you were to go back in time, magically, and you were to see the younger Laurie, what time would you go back to, and what advice would you give yourself?
Oh, wow. What time would I go back to? Probably just before high school. I think I grew up as a very quiet child and not really wanting to participate with other people. I'm sure today I would have been diagnosed with something on the spectrum. I'm sure there's all sorts of variations of autism, but I do feel that there are parts of my behavior and my way of thinking that would certainly place me on the autism spectrum. Self-diagnosis is not anything I encourage people to do. But it's when you read things and you start to kind of see yourself. I remember, I'm going off track here, but I remember an aunt going on a trip to Hawaii when I was still a very small child, I would guess maybe 6 or 7. And she brought back dolls for me and my sister and cousins. And each one, they were like dolls that looked like little Hawaiian girls. And everyone got, they were all in different dresses and different poses and things. And everyone's were really cute. And I got this one that was sitting cross-legged with this huge pout on her face.
This one you picked?
No, that was the one she picked for me. And, it's like, this one is, closest to your personality. So yeah, I would go back to before high school and hopefully try and tell myself to be more open to, and I found my way there eventually, but I think even during my time, like in Australia and other experiences, I still didn't fully participate in everything. I still hesitated too much, and I still do that to this day. And like being invited on this podcast, my instinct is to be like, hell no.
That's what you said at first, but not in those words. That's what you basically said. And I said, well, let me see if I can sweeten the pot a little bit.
Yeah, and then I realized you're doing it again. You're doing what comes most natural to you, which is to hide and not participate. So yes, I did decide I can't keep doing that, and here I am.
Oh, it's beautiful. Laurie, thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Oh,
I really
thank you so much.
It. Thank you
Great
so
to meet you.
much. And I hope we get to do some more, because there's so much more about your life that we didn't touch upon. But I want everyone to know the beginning up to this point. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I want to thank all of you for watching this podcast. Make sure you press like and subscribe. And never forget, it's all on loan. So continue to reach for the stars, because you're too blessed to be stressed.